I reached for Claire's purse on the counter to move it aside, and a hotel keycard slipped out, landing face up on the floor. The logo showed the Harbor Suites, and the room number was handwritten across the back, 412. I picked it up, looked at the number twice, and placed it flat on the table beside her phone charger. Before watching the video, please tell us in the comments, which country are you watching from? She was in the shower, humming softly. The purse stood open, the contents arranged neatly. A folded receipt from a rideshare app stuck out of the side pocket. I pulled it halfway out and saw the destination, Harbor Suites, downtown. The timestamp matched the night she said she worked late. I took a photo of the key and the receipt together on my phone, keeping the frame steady. The evidence was clear, simple, and silent. When she stepped out of the bathroom, she didn't notice anything missing. I handed her purse back casually, said I'd clean the table, and she smiled, thanking me for being thoughtful. She finished getting ready, grabbed her bag, and said she needed to stop by a client's office before lunch. I nodded, pretending to check emails, while her cab pulled up outside. The moment the door closed behind her, I opened my phone, checked the ride app, and ordered a car to follow. The drive downtown was slow. Her taxi stayed 3 vehicles ahead, turning toward the waterfront district. The hotel came into view, a narrow glass building with a silver awning and revolving door. I told my driver to pull over across the street. Claire stepped out, adjusted her coat, and walked in through the main entrance without hesitation. I watched her greet the desk clerk, a man in a navy vest, and hand him a card. He nodded and returned something small across the counter. I couldn't hear what was said, but the interaction was practiced, not new. I stepped out of the car, crossed the street, and walked into the lobby. The marble floor reflected the light overhead, and the air smelled of citrus cleaner. The desk clerk looked up. I asked if room 412 was under the name Claire Benson. He said hotel privacy policy didn't allow guest information sharing. I thanked him and turned away, stopping by a large mirror near the elevator. The reflection showed Claire stepping into the lift with another man. Mid-30s, gray jacket, short hair. He said something, and she smiled. The doors closed behind them. I didn't move for a few seconds. Then I walked to the reception desk again, pretending to check my phone, and said I'd left something in the restaurant last week. The clerk introduced himself as Marcus Reed and offered to check lost items. I said I'd return later and stepped out through the same revolving door. The city noise hit immediately, cars, wind, and footsteps blending in constant motion. I looked up at the 4th floor of the hotel. A curtain moved briefly, then settled. At a coffee shop across the street, I took a seat by the window, facing the entrance. I opened my laptop and began writing down what I'd seen. Names, times, details. Each line was factual, written like a report. I printed a mental picture. Her coat color, his jacket, the way they turned slightly toward each other while waiting for the elevator. Nothing in it required speculation. Everything was observable, verifiable. I stayed there until the afternoon, watching the hotel doors open and close. When Claire finally walked out alone, she paused on the sidewalk, checked her phone, and hailed a cab. I watched the taxi pull away before standing up and leaving. The photo of the keycard sat saved on my phone screen, clear and centered. The first piece of evidence was in place. The following morning, I opened her laptop while she was making coffee. The calendar app showed 2 entries labeled Client Review, each matching the same time she'd spent at the Harbor Suites. Both events were marked private, with no location details. The file names attached were titled Proposal Update and Logistics Summary. I copied the metadata from each and noted the timestamps in my notebook. When she left for work, I took a quiet photo of the screen for record. That afternoon, I searched our shared cloud folder for those same files. The names existed, but the data inside differed. Fewer pages, missing figures, and no signature block. She had uploaded separate versions, identical in layout, but not in content. I highlighted both side by side on the monitor. The difference wasn't random. It was deliberate editing before submission. I saved both to a USB drive labeled Comparative. Every version told part of a sequence. After work, she mentioned having another late meeting. Her explanation matched the earlier calendar note exactly. I nodded, said I'd ordered dinner, and watched her leave. When her rideshare receipt arrived through the shared email account, I checked the map. Same route, same hotel, same drop-off point. I forwarded the digital receipt to my secondary email and archived the message. Patterns like this didn't require intuition. They needed only repetition to become proof. I spent the evening cataloging small evidence pieces. The hotel key photo came first, followed by each receipt, timestamp, and screenshot. Every document was numbered, labeled, and stored in sequence. I kept descriptions factual. Location, time, item, action. It looked less like suspicion and more like procedure. I reminded myself that speculation added noise. Data stayed clean. Over the next few days, her behavior repeated itself with mathematical accuracy. Each morning she left around the same hour, carrying the same purse and folder. Each evening she returned with generic explanations that matched her digital schedule. One morning, I checked her car's glove compartment. Inside was a printed invoice from the Harbor Suites Cafe. 2 cappuccinos, 1 sandwich, 1 pastry. The receipt listed her name and a second signature that wasn't hers. The writing style was sharp, angular, male. I took a photo and left it where it was. That night, she came home later than usual, saying her client meeting had run long. I asked who the client was. She said, Ethan from Logistics. The name matched the one printed on the cafe receipt. I wrote it down immediately. When she went to shower, I checked her phone on the kitchen counter. The last call logged was to a number saved under E. Miles. The duration was short, but the timestamp placed it immediately after her supposed meeting. The next morning, I called the number from my work phone. A male voice answered, professional and direct. He said, Grantwood Distribution, this is Ethan. I thanked him and hung up. His tone confirmed the name without context. The pieces aligned cleanly. My job now was to connect his professional position to her schedule and confirm their intersection. I spent the next 2 evenings observing the Harbor Suites from the same cafe across the street. The lobby patterns became predictable. Guests entered with cards, left with folders, greeted the same staff. At exactly the hour marked on her calendar, Claire walked in again. This time, I didn't follow her inside. I stayed still, recording from across the glass. A few minutes later, a man matching Ethan's description arrived, checked in briefly, and disappeared into the elevator. My camera caught both sequences clearly. When she came home that night, she mentioned traffic on the bridge and smiled while checking her phone. I nodded, kept my tone neutral, and said nothing further. The data spoke clearly enough. The line between coincidence and certainty had already crossed. The next morning, I called the Harbor Suites and asked for Marcus Reed, the manager I had spoken to earlier. I introduced myself as Daniel Cole and explained that I needed to confirm a corporate reservation. He checked the system and said there was indeed a recurring booking under the name Claire Benson, billed through a business account. I asked if the account holder was listed as Grantwood Distribution. He paused, then confirmed quietly. That was Ethan Miles's company. I thanked him, ended the call, and recorded the details in my notes. After work, I stopped by the hotel. Marcus recognized me immediately and asked if I had found my lost item from before. I told him no, but I had another inquiry. I explained that I worked for a logistics firm that occasionally collaborated with Grantwood Distribution and needed to verify client attendance for an audit. He looked uncertain until I showed him a printed company letterhead and my ID badge. After a short hesitation, he checked the logbook. The name Claire Benson appeared twice that week, both times with room number 412 and paid using an external card ending in the same digits as hers. I requested a printed receipt for record and left a generous tip without explanation. Outside, crossed the street to a small convenience store that overlooked the hotel entrance. I purchased a phone mount and positioned it in my car parked nearby. The angle covered both the main door and the valet area. I left the camera recording while I reviewed her messages later at home. She had sent one text at 3:07 p.m. to E. Miles saying, "Same place, usual time." He replied, "Room ready." I saved the screenshots and added them to the folder labeled Sequence 2. The following day, I returned to the hotel before noon and checked the camera footage from my car. It showed Claire arriving in a gray sedan, carrying her brown purse and a folder. 5 minutes later, Ethan exited a black SUV and entered the building. I noted the timestamps. I waited another 20 minutes, then walked in through the side entrance. Marcus stood behind the desk, reviewing paperwork. I asked casually if the restaurant upstairs was open for lunch. He said it was reserved for private use. I nodded and stepped into the lobby seating area, positioned with a view of the elevator. The doors opened, revealing Claire and Ethan stepping out together. She carried the same folder. He held an envelope. Neither spoke as they walked toward the restaurant. When they disappeared inside, I used the reflection in a glass partition to adjust my phone camera discreetly. The footage caught the entrance door closing and the envelope visible in Ethan's hand. I captured 3 still frames, each with a timestamp, and saved them immediately. I left the lobby, crossed the street, and uploaded the clips to my secure drive. The images were clear enough to identify both faces and the item exchanged. That evening, I verified the invoice linked to their reservation through a friend in accounting. The payment method traced back to a Grantwood business card assigned to Ethan Miles. The total included conference meal, 2 guests. There was no record of any meeting that matched the date on Claire's calendar. The entry labeled Client Review was a placeholder. I printed the billing detail and placed it behind the receipt from Marcus. At home, I organized everything chronologically: video clips, texts, hotel records, payment logs. The progression formed a continuous chain: discovery, confirmation, verification. There were no assumptions or opinions written anywhere, only evidence arranged in sequence. The picture was complete. Still, I waited one more day to decide what to do next. I wanted one final, undeniable moment of truth, something that would connect every thread beyond question. If this were you, would you act or wait? Please tell us in the comment. The next day began without deviation. Claire left the apartment early, saying she needed to finalize a presentation. I waited until her taxi turned the corner, then drove toward Harbor Suites. The same gray sedan she had used last time stood parked at the curb. I took a photo of the plate number and continued inside. Marcus was at the front desk, speaking with a staff member. I greeted him and asked if room 412 was still reserved under the same account. He confirmed and added that the guests had checked in 15 minutes earlier. I thanked him, purchased a cup of coffee from the lobby counter, and sat within view of the elevator. At precisely 11:30, the elevator doors opened. Claire and Ethan stepped out, walking toward the corridor that led to the conference rooms. She carried a brown folder again, identical to the one I'd seen before. He held a white envelope sealed with a gold sticker. They didn't speak. Their pace was synchronized, their actions efficient. I watched as they stopped briefly by the door to room 412. Ethan used his keycard, opened the door, and gestured for her to enter first. She did. He followed, closing the door behind them. I wrote down the time, the direction they came from, and the sequence of gestures. The evidence didn't need interpretation. It was visible fact. After they went inside, I approached Marcus and asked if I could book the same room for next week. He said it was usually reserved for long-term guests, but offered to check availability. While he was distracted, I glanced at the reservation screen. The billing contact displayed Grantwood Distribution, @E Miles. The purpose line read Vendor Coordination. I memorized it and walked away before he noticed. Outside, I sat in my car, waiting. 2 hours later, the door opened. Ethan exited first, adjusting his tie, followed by Claire holding the same folder, now thicker than before. He handed her the envelope. She tucked it under the folder and smiled briefly before heading toward the elevator. I took a photo through the windshield. The sunlight caught both their faces clearly. As she stepped outside, I started the engine but kept distance. Her cab arrived quickly. She entered without hesitation. I followed until it merged onto the highway, direction home. When she arrived that evening, I noticed the folder was missing from her bag. She placed her purse on the counter, smiled, and said the client was satisfied. I nodded, asked no questions, and let the silence fill the room. Later, while she showered, I checked her phone again. A message from E. Miles read, "Funds transferred. Delete message." The confirmation matched the envelope handoff I'd filmed earlier. I took a screenshot and added it to the chain. That night, I arranged all the files in order: photos, receipts, footage, messages, and billing records. The folder filled completely, spine bulging with printed proof. The narrative was self-sustaining. There was no space left for doubt. The affair existed alongside a financial exchange. The partnership extended beyond personal betrayal into business violation. Both had used the company's access and reputation for private transactions. The line between relationship and misconduct had blurred completely. I didn't confront her immediately. Confrontation ends evidence. I needed closure that extended past confession, closure that restored balance. I contacted Marcus privately and asked if the hotel used digital backups for room access. He confirmed every entry recorded an ID number. I requested a copy for corporate verification. He sent it within the hour. The file listed each time the door to room 412 had opened under both names. The data was precise and time-stamped. I saved it as the final entry in my folder. The picture was now complete. I had everything: movement, documentation, confirmation, and motive. What came next would not involve shouting or accusation. It would follow the same structure as every record so far: methodical, factual, and final. I began the plan the same way I had gathered evidence, with structure and control. The goal was not confrontation, It was exposure with precision. Claire and Ethan had turned a personal betrayal into a professional liability. My method would ensure both faced verifiable consequences without my name attached to the outcome. Every action required documentation, timing, and plausible distance. I started with the company network. Both Claire and Ethan worked indirectly through the same vendor chain. I created a decoy financial proposal, an authentic-looking spreadsheet labeled Final Pricing Model, internal use only. Inside, I placed one line item tagged with a distinctive phrase, Harbor Logistics Variable, Code 19. The file contained a deliberate rounding error and a watermark linking back to my private server. Only Claire's department had access to that folder, and I made sure she was the one reviewing it. I waited for the trace to appear. Parallel to that, I contacted Marcus at the Harbor Suites and asked him to call when Claire or Ethan booked another stay. I told him our firm was conducting a financial audit and the information was relevant. He agreed under the condition of discretion. I thanked him and sent him a prepaid retainer for administrative cooperation. His role would be limited to providing factual verification, nothing more. Within a week, the alert arrived. Marcus texted that the same room, 412, had been reserved again for a conference lunch. The reservation used the same company card. I replied with confirmation and said I'd stop by that day. Meanwhile, Sophia, an acquaintance in data compliance, monitored my decoy file. Within 2 hours of the reservation being made, the phrase Harbor Logistics Variable, Code 19, appeared in an external server log tied to Grantwood Distribution. The trace was successful. The bait had been copied, shared, and modified. Proof that information flow between Claire and Ethan was active again. That evening, I met Sophia for coffee and explained the broader pattern. She verified the watermark trail and agreed to prepare a formal summary in case the company initiated an internal audit. Every link in the chain pointed to unauthorized data access and external transmission. The structure was now solid enough to move beyond suspicion. My next step required visual confirmation of another exchange. The day of the meeting, I positioned myself in the hotel cafe, facing the corridor that led to room 412. Marcus had arranged for the surveillance footage to be archived privately. I sat with a laptop open, appearing occupied. Claire arrived at noon, carrying her purse and the same folder. Ethan followed soon after, holding a briefcase. They greeted each other briefly, professional in public, but familiar in posture. When they disappeared into the room, I noted the time. Through the cafe's reflection in the glass divider, I captured them exchanging the same envelope pattern as before. This time, the contents inside were visible briefly. Documents printed with company headers and line items from my decoy file. The phrase, Harbor Logistics Variable, Code 19, was clearly visible through the transparent sleeve. I took a still shot on my phone. Once they left, I collected the printed receipt for their lunch, signed under Ethan's name, and asked Marcus to seal a copy of the access log for that day. He agreed and provided the digital timestamp. The evidence now connected Claire's physical meeting to a confirmed data breach and financial exchange. When I returned home, I organized everything into a single digital report labeled Benson-Miles Sequence. It contained timestamps, visual evidence, and verifiable links. The report was sent anonymously to both companies' compliance divisions using encrypted mail. The action would trigger immediate review without identifying the source. The plan was complete. The outcome now depended on the systems they had exploited, not me. I checked the encrypted inbox and confirmed delivery of the anonymous report. Sophia messaged that bank compliance had flagged the shell company account. Marcus called to say he had preserved the access logs as requested. I sat in the hotel cafe and watched security monitor feeds quietly. Claire arrived carrying the same brown folder and moved directly through reception. Ethan entered shortly after and kept a briefcase in his hand. They went to room 412 and closed the door upon entry. Sophia notified me when the bait file registered an external download. The server log matched the watermark and the unique phrase exactly. I signaled Marcus, who recorded the door activity on a separate device. Sophia sent a secure link with a live feed of the folder being opened remotely. The image showed the decoy invoice on a desktop screen in clear view. Through the cafe window reflection, I saw Ethan slide an envelope under a folder. Marcus later confirmed staff logged the envelope handoff in the private register. I zoomed the feed and captured serial numbers printed on the envelope sleeve. The download meta tag included the phrase we embedded for tracing. Sophia exported the hash comparison and appended it to the evidence packet. I photographed the reflected envelope serials and saved the images to encrypted storage. The sequence now linked the file copy to a physical exchange at the hotel. Each element matched across independent systems. Soon after, Marcus informed me the manager on duty counted cash and recorded referenced invoice numbers. The register slip matched the envelope serials visible in my footage. Sophia then reported a concurrent bank alert for an outgoing transfer flagged by compliance. The transfer referenced the shell company and used the same invoice code embedded in our bait file. An external auditor arrived to corroborate the links and review preserved logs. The auditor noted the identical identifiers across file, feed, register, and bank statements. Legal drafted preservation notices and requested immediate account holds from the banking compliance desk. The bank confirmed holds were placed and funds immobilized pending investigation. The chain of custody was now supported by multiple independent custodians. Security escorted Claire and Ethan from the corridor when compliance arrived with sealed orders. I remained at the cafe to record their escorted movement without interfering. Legal secured devices and placed them into forensic bags in view of hotel staff. Marcus handed over copies of the private register and the sealed envelope records he had kept. Sophia coordinated with forensic analysts to image file systems from both laptops on site. The auditors began compiling a formal report tying downloads to transfers and handoffs. The external auditor prepared notices to regulatory authorities and provided instructions for next steps. Each document was signed, labeled, duplicated, and entered into evidence trackers for chain completeness. When investigators took custody of the preserved materials, they verified each link personally. They confirmed the bait phrase, the watermark trace, the envelope serials, and the bank hold references. The shell company account showed interdicted outgoing wires and frozen balances matching recorded invoice totals. Compliance issued immediate administrative measures against anyone with access privileges linked to the transactions. HR suspended involved staff pending legal outcomes and internal hearings. The hotel cooperated fully and provided sealed CCTV exports and register logs. Everything moved through formal channels now, leaving no room for removal or alteration of records. Would you call this revenge or justice? Please tell us in the comments. The investigation unfolded with quiet precision. Both companies received compliance alerts within 24 hours of the evidence submission. Ethan Miles was suspended immediately pending inquiry, and Claire Benson's credentials were revoked before noon. The joint audit between their two firms revealed parallel documentation trails, invoice codes, unauthorized data transfers, and repeated hotel billing under personal accounts. Each record matched the metadata from Sophia's watermark report. The auditors wrote in their summary, Source data confirms collusion and misappropriation of proprietary material. The language was clean, clinical, and final. I visited Marcus at Harbor Suites one last time to collect confirmation of delivery logs. He handed me sealed copies of the access registry and the cafe receipts from their final meeting. He said quietly that corporate investigators had already reviewed the CCTV recordings and taken statements from the staff. He added that neither guest had returned to the property since the day of the sting. The manager replaced the old entry code system that same week. Everything about the hotel had returned to routine. At both offices, internal reviews led to structural change. Ethan's firm suspended its vendor bidding license pending resolution. Claire's employer issued an internal statement citing data protection breaches by external collaborators. Her position was terminated without appeal. Regulatory agencies stepped in to assess whether confidential material had been sold to competitors. The report indicated total estimated losses of $480,000 across multiple contracts. Compliance documentation showed full traceability of the diverted information back to Ethan's department. Both names appeared on the final legal brief filed with the regulators. Sophia forwarded me an anonymized version of the audit's conclusion. The sequence outlined each stage exactly as we designed: bait file, access trail, bank transfer, and physical evidence. The investigators commended the precision of the documentation process, but listed source identity undisclosed. That was intentional. The results existed independent of personal motive. Revenge had never needed attribution, only completion. The following month, court hearings were scheduled for formal charges of fraud, misconduct, and breach of confidentiality. Ethan accepted a settlement agreement that required full restitution and permanent exclusion from federal contracts. Claire's case concluded under company arbitration. The terms included forfeiture of severance and a binding non-compete clause. The details were procedural, not emotional. The outcome restored balance by the same rules they had tried to exploit. Afterward, Sophia's department introduced new compliance standards modeled on our approach. The memo described it as case-based system reform for data trace tracking. The entire company adopted the method for all sensitive proposals. My involvement remained uncredited, but noted in private correspondence. That was sufficient. Marcus received recognition from the hotel's corporate group for exceptional cooperation with investigative authorities. Every participant had their role acknowledged formally, and the incident transitioned into record status. At home, the apartment felt unchanged. Same layout, same quiet routine. But absence carried no weight. Claire's belongings were gone, replaced by empty drawers and neutral order. I deleted her remaining messages and cleared archived folders, keeping only the evidence files now stored under a locked directory. Their purpose was finished. I archived them, encrypted, and labeled closed. The story reached its end without confrontation, confession, or display. Consequences replaced emotion. The process had proven something practical. Control is best exercised through documentation, not reaction. Every step, once recorded, becomes inevitable. 3 months later, the corporate investigation closed with full compliance clearance. The report summary listed, case resolved, corrective systems implemented. No reference to internal sources or witnesses appeared anywhere. That anonymity preserved the integrity of the record. Sophia sent a brief message. Process verified. Protocols updated. Credit assigned to methodology. I archived her note in a separate folder labeled post-action. Nothing about it required reply. The company's workflow shifted quietly. Every new project now required dual authentication, external data audits, and encryption marks similar to the watermark she designed. Meetings involving external partners were restricted to verified channels. Legal drafted an internal document citing Harbor Suites incident as precedent for procedural reform. Only senior management knew the full scope of that title. For everyone else, it was a case study on information control. The narrative no longer belonged to me or anyone involved. It existed as policy, detached and utilitarian. I transferred to a new department located on the city's northern side. The office was smaller, quieter, built around logistics review. My new role focused on verifying vendor documentation, a task requiring calm precision and absence of speculation. Each day I approved figures, logged details, and signed reports. The habit of documentation that once exposed betrayal now maintained normal operations. Accuracy became routine again, steady and measurable. Occasionally, I passed Harbor Suites during commutes to client sites. The glass facade reflected morning traffic, and the lobby looked unchanged. The restaurant remained busy, guests checking in and out without pause. I never stopped to go inside. The place no longer held meaning. It was just another building in the city's pattern. Observation, not attachment, defined memory. A week before year's end, I received a call from Marcus Reed. He said the investigation had officially concluded and that his cooperation had been recognized internally. He thanked me for being professional during difficult circumstances. His phrasing stayed neutral, as if we were discussing inventory control. I replied that the system worked as designed. He agreed, said he was transferring to another branch, and wished me well. That closed his chapter in the sequence. At home, my environment remained orderly. I had replaced Claire's personal items months earlier with neutral decor, books, files, and framed technical diagrams. One drawer in my desk still held a single envelope containing the first hotel key card and the printed photo of the receipt. Both were faded now. I kept them sealed, not as reminders, but as documentation of origin. Every process needs a starting point. This was mine. When I reviewed my annual evaluation, the closing note from my director read, "Excellent adherence to procedure, high documentation accuracy, and consistent judgment under pressure." That line defined the outcome better than any moral reflection could. The events at Harbor Suites had reshaped professional discipline into personal practice. Detached, methodical, precise. On weekends, I walked along the waterfront where the hotel lights reflected off the river. People passed by carrying briefcases, talking or checking messages. Every pattern looked familiar. Repetition, routine, sequence, betrayal, exposure, correction. All versions of the same process, played in different contexts. The cycle always returned to one truth. Evidence is stronger than emotion. I watched a boat pass under the bridge and continued walking. The waterline moved evenly, unbroken by what had come before. The work was done, the file complete, and the system corrected. Balance restored itself quietly. Not through confrontation, but through record-keeping. What would you have done differently? Comment your opinion below. Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe for more real stories.